Hello and welcome to another UKGN Network podcast. I'm Zoidberg. This week we've been playing Death Stranding, the long-awaited new game from Hideo Kojima. The creator of Metal Gear Solid is the closest thing the gaming industry has to an auteur, always wanting to tell his own stories in his own ways. And since his very public split with Konami, we should be very grateful that Sony have allowed him the freedom to create Death Stranding. While it's definitely not a game for everyone, it's quite unlike any game we've ever played, and it has a way of hooking you in without you even realising. It's not an action game, except when it is. The landscape is wide open and empty, yet there's so much to discover, and the plot makes no sense, but it has its own internal logic that makes it work. The production quality is superb throughout, and we haven't found a fault yet. Delivering packages is the core of the gameplay, and making connections with every hub in the game. We amazed ourselves with how much concentration we put into delivering a pizza within 30 minutes. The weakest link would have to be the characters in the early chapters, most of which seem to be there just to spout exposition. Throughout his career, Hideo Kojima has been responsible for some of the most memorable gaming moments of our lives. Having Psycho Mantis being able to read our movements and memory cards, the original Raiden reveal in Metal Gear 2, being able to set your PS2 clock forward a year and cheat your way past the end, are all things that we'll never forget. Death Stranding also has a number of similar moments, but you're much better off discovering them for yourself. To celebrate the release, instead of our usual top 5, we're going to talk about 5 other games that have carried the Hideo Kojima name that you might not have heard of. Snatcher, 1994. Early on in this Blade Runner-inspired adventure, the central character, Gillian Seed, is introduced to his newly assigned robot companion. He's a talking, two-legged servant that can be used to access information, aid with your investigations, and save your game. His name? Metal Gear. This was 1994, 7 years after Solid Snake's first appearance on the MSX, and 4 years before his arrival on the PlayStation. As a game, it's a well-written adventure, and features a lot of impressive voice work, thanks to being on Sega CD. Although it can be a frustrating experience, as it's never obvious which items you have to look at more than once in order to advance the story. It's definitely worth a play though. Policenauts, 1996. Policenauts never got a UK release, unless you count being able to switch the region of your PS3 store, but even then you'd needed to speak or understand Japanese in order to play it. Fortunately, it did get a full fan translation 15 years after its original release, allowing us to finally play it for ourselves. It has an almost identical structure to Snatcher, being an adventure game that features an occasional shooting gallery section, and if you played it on the Saturn, these were playable with a light gun too. There's a strong cinematic influence about the sci-fi detective story that unfolds as you play, particularly when you team up with an old friend at the end of Act 1 and form a typical buddy cop partnership. Zone of the Enders, 2001. Realising that mech combat didn't have the same appeal for Western audiences as they do in Japan, Konami made the extremely wise decision to release Zone of the Enders with a demo disc for the upcoming Metal Gear Solid 2. Many copies will have sold to players desperate to get an early taste of Snake's return, but everyone who bought it for this reason will have also discovered a great anime-inspired sci-fi shooter. Even though Kojima only acted as a producer on this one, there are themes present that permeate all of his games, like the limits of artificial intelligence and the human cost of war. Lunar Nights, 2007. Another recurring feature of Kojima games is breaking the fourth wall, and allowing the real world into the game. Lunar Nights was the fourth game in the Boktai series, that began on the Game Boy Advance. The series was notable for how the cartridges had a built-in light sensor, that gave in-game characters extra powers if you played the game in direct sunlight. Although the DS had no such sensor, you could achieve the same effect by putting one of the first 3 games into the console at the same time. If you want to play it this way today, be prepared for it to cost you upwards of £70, and that's just for the games. Castlevania Lords of Shadow, 2010. Although developer Mercury Steam handled the majority of this decent Castlevania spin-off, Konami offered them the support of Kojima as a producer. His involvement mainly concerned the central character of Gabriel Belmont, voiced by Robert Carlyle, who he insisted be made more relatable to the player. This included a less muscle-bound look and a more heroic face. It worked too, as Gabriel's one of the best characters in the whole series, and it helped to make the game stand out despite strong competition from the likes of God of War 3 and Bayonetta, which were both released in the same year. Now it's time for a quick look at this week's new releases with our reviews. After the surprise success of the first Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, released at the end of 2007, A new game has arrived every 2 years since. The latest, coming in time for the Tokyo Olympics next year, does make use of the motion control capabilities of the Switch, but you're much better off sticking to regular controllers. With 21 regular events, 10 retro events and 3 dream events, there's more than enough here to keep a group of friends busy for a while. Naturally, some events are better than others. Track and field events are great as always, and sports climbing is a definite highlight, but football and rugby sevens wouldn't have been missed. Best of all though are the retro events, which take us back to Tokyo 1964 with an 8-bit style presentation and old school controls. It's all very enjoyable, but the appeal disappears quickly unless you have other human players to compete against. By the time the Olympics actually arrive next year, you'll have probably forgotten all about it. Nobody could have foreseen how much of a box office success the last Jumanji film was, and this year we're getting not only a sequel, but also a belated game tie-in. Visually, the developers have gone for a more cartoon-like appearance, so we get caricatured likenesses of the film's stars, but it actually serves the game quite well. It plays like a kid's version of Gears of War, with each of the 4 playable characters being given a special move that's unique to them in an effort to boost replayability. Even though there are 4 levels, based in different locations, the level layouts are very repetitive, making prolonged play feel like a chore. It's no wonder that one of the game's achievements rewards you for 6 hours of play, as most people probably won't last that long. At the end of the day, it's going to entertain younger players, and I've certainly played worse, but this is still the type of lazy cash-in that we thought we'd seen the last of. Moreover, it's in no way worth £35 of anyone's money. First released on iOS and the 3DS, Layton's Mystery Journey is the 7th entry in Level 5's long-running series of puzzle adventures, 9 if you count the spin-offs, and it has all the same charm and whimsy that you'd expect. The story follows Professor Layton's daughter, Catriel, who, having just opened her own detective agency, finds herself thrown into a series of connected mysteries in and around London. While the solutions to each case can be bizarre, they're fun to solve thanks to a great cast of eccentric characters to talk to, and the puzzles themselves are just the right level of difficulty to be taxing without being annoying. It's a game clearly designed to be played handheld too, as it's one of the few Switch games to use the console's touchscreen, but it's still good to play it on your TV as well. It's also good that you can download daily puzzles to keep you playing by connecting online. My main issue with it though is the price. Despite the deluxe edition tag, this is exactly the same game that it was, and £35 is a lot for what's essentially a 2-year-old game, and one that originally cost under £20. Retro Game of the Week time now, and after spending a bulk of this show talking about Hideo Kojima games that you may not have heard of, we'll end with one that you definitely will know. Metal Gear, the game that kicked off one of the most successful franchises ever, was released in 1987, and although it might seem pretty basic by today's standards, the seeds of what was to follow were already here. Characters like Solid Snake, Big Boss and Grey Fox were all introduced, along with features such as the Codex Communicator, sneaking past guards rather than attacking them, exclamation marks appearing over their heads when they spot you, and even the presence of a packet of cigarettes in your inventory. If you're wanting to play it today, make sure you hunt down the original MSX version, which was available on either the second disc of Metal Gear Solid 3 Subsistence for PS2, or on the Metal Gear Solid HD collection on PS3 and Xbox 360. It's vastly superior to the NES version, which almost feels like an entirely different game. If you've never played it, you definitely should, even if it's just for a bit of a history lesson. And that wraps up another episode of our podcast. We hope you enjoyed it. If you have any memories of playing Hideo Kojima games, or just want to make suggestions for future episodes, please let us know in the comments. We'll be back next Friday with another packed show, including, amongst other things, a look at Jedi Fallen Order and the launch of Google Stadia. Give us a like and subscribe to make sure you don't miss it. In the meantime, why not follow us on social media at UKGN Network to keep up to date with what we're playing. Until next time, thanks for listening, see you soon.